Michael Baez is here with me to talk about his movie De La Cruz, which is going to be streaming on Amazon Prime starting August 8th.
Yes, correct.
August 8th. So, De La Cruz, it from the outset, it looked like a sort of a fighting movie, $1 Million Baby Story. Nothing like that at all. Completely took me by surprise. I'm not going to spoil the plot. I'll let you share what parts of it you can, but the actors are really putting their all into it. I don't see acting like this in a lot of independent movies. I just came off the Tribeca Film Festival, and
cool.
I don't do a lot of the narrative films there because it's independent movies. A lot of people are just starting out. From my personal view, I feel like the dialogue and the script in this movie are very solid. I love the way that it's directed.
Thank you.
But let's talk about this from your perspective. So you're the director. You also wrote the movie, right?
Yeah, I wrote it, I directed it, I produced it, and I edited it.
Do you have any? I didn't catch any parts in, but do you have a cameo at some point?
I do. Yeah,
Okay.
You gotta watch that part.
All right, I'll make sure I find that. So how long did it take you from? And I'm asking this as if I haven't been following you for the last couple of years, but how long did it take you from when you decided you wanted to write this movie to building it up and doing the casting and finally doing all the production to this point that now you're finally getting a release date? Yeah,
it's crazy. It's a crazy story. I started. The first script I wrote, I finished it in 1999. Started in 1997. So it took 2 years to write the first script, which has now become a trilogy. So what's now known as part 3 was a one-off. It was just going to be a single project. I came out of film school with all this enthusiasm and excitement, wrote this script, presented it to my mentor who's in New York. His name is Eddie Pomerantz. He was a teacher at the Writers Guild workshop. He offered an amazing workshop for screenwriters for free, completely from his heart. It was amazing. And he sat with me for 2 years. He was like, look, you got something really special here. I want to work with you. And we met, twice a week for 2 years and came up with this solid script. But then it was like, okay, great. Now what do I do with it? I don't know what the hell to do with it. It was going to cost millions of dollars to shoot it. So, I put it aside, did short films, opened the yoga schools, how we met, had a kid, got married, got divorced, life, but I always had this story in the back of my mind. And in 2018, I said, all right, you know what? Let me shoot a short version of that script. Let me just shoot 20 pages and see, can I do it high quality, low budget? So I shot 20 pages. And I was like, okay, it's doable. And then my friend who worked on that film with me, my friend name is Angie Castro. She got inspired. So she's from Colombia. She was living in New York. She flew back to Colombia, shot her short film, and then called me excited. Michael, you got to shoot here. You can make your movie finally. It won't cost as much money. So I went to Colombia with her and was like, okay, it's a possibility. I think it could work, but it's such a New York story. I said, let me write a prequel to that story and set it for like another country, whether it be Colombia or Puerto Rico, where I'm from. So that was the plan. So I wrote a prequel, which is now known as Muertos, and that other script was called Butterfly in the Fire. It's all following the story of Yoli De La Cruz. And then, the pandemic hits, the strike happens. I'm like, oh my God, I'm not going to get this freaking movie made, So I was just trying to think, like, how can I make this movie for a small budget? So I said, okay, I'm going to write one more prequel, and that's going to be the origin story of Yoli, and that's how it has become. So yeah, to answer the long answer to your question, the short answer is 1997.
No, that's exactly what I was hoping to hear, because I knew that, like I said, I followed you for many years. We go back to when I did my yoga teach training, but I do want to. I originally wasn't thinking I'd talk about that, but that is something significant, because one of the things that you teach in your yoga sequence is a blending of the Eastern traditions, both the yoga arts and the Eastern martial arts. And you also have a background in martial arts. You practice martial arts for many years. So you're not just going into this as just a guy who really liked movies. You know exactly what you're talking about when it comes to the training of Yoli, when it comes to her matchups and how the other groups get involved. You have an understanding of that. And so the next question that I have is, how much of what goes on in this story have you drawn from your experiences?
Yeah, that's a great question. I definitely always try to include some form of martial arts into my movies. I always try to include some form of spirituality. Growing up Catholic, became Christian, then discovered yoga. I've been through it all. Studied the Kabbalah here in California. It's just I just appreciate culture. I appreciate religion. I appreciate faith and spirituality. And yoga definitely has that. But the martial arts was something that just always spoke to me since I was a kid. My dad studied martial arts. He grew up in the 70s. I grew up in the 70s. Watching Bruce Lee. Enter the Dragon had a huge impact on me as just as a viewer, as a person, as a human being. And then to really get involved in the martial arts. So I always try to incorporate it into, if there's a fight scene, it's always gonna be martial arts. And that's the way I think most movies are right now. Like before, it used to be like brawling and boxing, and now it's just straight up kung fu and wire fu and all that stuff.
And so talking about that, the fight scenes in this movie, like I said, I really like the way that you directed it.
Thank you.
I like the way that the fight scenes are shot. It doesn't look like you used wires and a lot of special effects in that. So it's very real kind of cinematography when it comes to those action sequences. But talking about the cinematography, how did you decide what would be the best angles to shoot? Like when Yoli's fighting in the ring, or if there was a fight going on the street, something like that.
Sure. So it was important to me to make sure that the fights felt authentic and real. I didn't want it to feel like a super crazy, kung fu movie flipping through the air. I didn't want that at all. I wanted to be grounded in reality in terms of the fight style, especially because it's rooted in MMA. The main character Yoli becomes an MMA fighter ultimately and gets into the cage. So I wanted to just show the authenticity of fighting. And in terms of like the choreography, what was so amazing was that the actress, Sofía Díaz, she actually trained for 3 years for this role. Because while I was trying to raise money for part 2, Muertos, she was in training. We cast her in Guadalajara. She's from Mexico, in Guadalajara. We already had someone in mind. She comes into the audition. She just completely blows us out the water. But I had already promised a role to someone else. We had gotten 400 submissions from all around the world, from different actresses wanting this role, right? Because it's a great role. A young Latina who's an MMA fighter. It's like, bro, every actress wants that role. 400 submissions. So we found somebody in Mexico City. She backed out unexpectedly with no explanation, but then we were fortunate that we were able to work with Sophie. So then we went back to Guadalajara, got Sophie, and then paired her up with a trainer. We wound up pairing her up with the father of the former UFC champion. Her name is Alexa Grasso. She's an amazing badass, Mexican. She's the first Mexican female fighter to win the title of UFC champion. So Sophie trained with Alexa's father. His name is Luis Grasso. For 3 years, hardcore. He trained her as if she was going to be in the UFC. So it was really important to have that authentic style. In terms of the camera angles, which you asked, we had a really great DP in Mexico City where we shot it. We shot in Mexico City. His name is David Trejo. And I had met him, I had a DP who I had in mind, and, we had a situation with him where he just bounced also out of project. He's gone. And then David stepped in and he did an amazing job. And we worked really, really well together. It was nerve-wracking, because to lose your DP a couple of weeks before you start to shoot was like, oh my God, I had spent time working with this guy. But David came in and he had a really chill attitude. He has a lot of experience shooting features and shooting shows, series and things like that. So his approach was always like, let's just, we would meet, discuss the scene. We would do the blocking with the actors during rehearsal. We would see what would be the best angles. And then, luckily we had 2 cameras. So we were always getting a lot of coverage from different angles. Yeah, we had 2 cameras.
Okay. That's
that's
something. I mean, I'm sure more feature films are using 2 cameras. That's
not independent films.
Not the independent film.
No, we were very lucky.
And this is a question that I ask pretty much anyone who is making a big project like this, whether it's a movie or a video game or whatever it is. I always ask you this question: what was your biggest challenge in bringing this out. I mean, I know, take your pick from the last 20 years, right?
Yeah. I think the biggest challenge, there were many challenges. I always joke around. I think I'm going to do it. I'm going to do a podcast or a book called Through Hell and Back, The Making of De La Cruz, because I went through it, man. I went through the fire many, many, many times. I think the first challenge, of course, is raising the budget, and we were very fortunate that a buddy of mine named Ed Martin connected me to another guy named Craig Cohen, and Craig Cohen was our first investor, and that got us started. That got us off to the races. We were able to go. Then once we were over there is when the hardship started to happen. We unfortunately teamed up with 2 local producers over there who completely took advantage of us, milked the money from the budget, gave us a crazy tight schedule. We shot this movie in 16 days, which is insane to shoot a feature film. 2-hour feature with fights, with visual effects, with stunts, with gunshots, with crazy, right? Big cast, big crew. 16 days, nuts. So it was like very long days, very long nights. So it was a very difficult. So that was it. But then coming back to the US, I was like, hey, I'm not going to work with those guys in terms of, because they were supposed to do post production. I was like, there's no way I'm working with those guys. They just had a really horrible experience. So luckily, I know how to edit. So it's like, okay, I gotta get myself mentally prepared. Like, okay, now I gotta edit everything that we shot, hours and hours of footage. So that was a hard thing. So it took me about 2 months to edit the first rough cut, which was pretty solid. And then I sent it to my mentor, who I mentioned, Eddie Pomerantz. He gave me some tips, came back, worked on it some more, and then started submitting it. Started submitting it to film festivals, started submitting it to different companies, and we were very fortunate. At this point to this date, we won 29 awards for this movie in every area, from art department, cinematography, fight choreography, the best lead actress. Sophie, the lead actress, won I think 4 or 5 awards at this point. The guy who plays her dad, Fernando, won 2 awards. So it's been really kicking butt. And then thank God we were able to land a distribution deal.
Tell us the names of the main actress again, Sofía.
Yeah, Sofía Díaz. Sofía Díaz plays Yoli De La Cruz, and Fernando Gaviria, he plays her dad, Santiago De La Cruz, and there's a bunch of wonderful actors. Issac Hernandez is incredible. There's the Dayana Rivas, Paloma Cinco,
Hernandez
Ceja.
is the young man, the man that we're following.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he's terrific. He and Sofía have a lot. They have really good dialogue when they're on.
It's about her trainer.
Yeah, him also.
Yeah, that was Raúl Patiño.
Oh,
He's a great actor as well. We had an amazing cast. I gotta say, the great thing is that I was able to dig and find the best possible actors, and of course, great actors know other great actors. So then they were connecting me and introduced me to other people, and it was just wonderful. I'm very, very proud of the entire cast. I think they did an amazing job. They worked so hard for very little money because it's all low budget. But for many of them, including the lead, this was their first time in a feature film. Period. Not to mention the first time in a feature film that's in English. Most of them are doing stuff over there in Mexico.
I was going to mention it. It's English and there's some Spanish dialogue with English subtitles, but it's mostly English language film. It's another major thing because produced mostly independent. This is another thing that I figure I mentioned because when I talk about feature films, I generally go with what the rating is. And I know it's going to be on Amazon Prime, so it's probably going to get. It looks like it might be closer to an R rating. I don't see anything wrong with teenagers 16. I watched this movie when I was 16.
Exactly. And I really hope that, they do see it, because I think that given that, Sofía is playing a 17-year-old girl, coming out of high school, and all the stuff that she deals with, I think it's important for young people to see this movie because it has a strong message of dealing with sexual assault and really owning one's power and standing up for oneself, so I think that's very important. I think that, I discovered martial arts at 13 years old, and I credit my mom and my dad were thank God for them for putting me into it and training me, because from 13 to 23, that's all I did. And I kept off the streets. I didn't get involved in drugs. I didn't, a few of my friends got arrested. They got into trouble. I was completely free of that because of the martial arts. So I really hope that the youth really gravitates towards this and gets inspired to train, to work out, to do martial arts, or some type of a discipline to really keep them, safe.
Wonderful. Well, again, the movie is De La Cruz. It comes out August 8th, 8/8 on Amazon.
8/8. Yeah, and Fandango at home,
Fandango at home, and Amazon Prime. 8/8, August 8th. De La Cruz.
Yes. All right.
Thank you very much, Michael, and good luck.
All right, brother. Namaste.